Welcome to episode 79 of the XrmToolCast. In this episode, I speak with Temmy Wahyu Raharjo, a fellow Microsoft MVP, about dependency injection, which it can be a very difficult subject for developers, so this is definitely more on the more technical side for an episode content. But Temmy is a power platformer, a blogger, a Microsoft MVP, a developer mainly in the .NET sense, with love struck on TDD mindset, TDD being test-driven development. And he has a goal this year of Azure. At least that's what his Twitter profile says. I didn't read it off when I introduced him during the show, so I figured I'd do it now. And that way you know who he is and be able to sit back and relax and enjoy the show. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the XrmToolCast. With me, your host, Daryl, always raising the bar, and my guest. I have a guest. I don't have I guess maybe you can either be a co-host or a guest. What do you want to be today, Temmy?
I'm not really sure, Daryl, but I will try to set my hi also. Hi, like your name, the bar. Yes.
All right. So we'll call you a guest just to make it easier to not have to give you too high of expectations here. So, unfortunately, Scott has come down with COVID and is coughing and having some issues talking and everything else. So he is unable to make it today. And if we don't get it done today or tomorrow, then we won't have time to edit it for Sunday. So we're going to go without him. Everyone feel free to send prayers and support to Scott. I'm assuming he'll do just fine. He hasn't told me that he's in dire straits. Just was not feeling up for doing the podcast. So anyway, so that's the housekeeping. That's off here. But so the subject for today is a subject that I've been wanting to do a podcast on for a while. It's definitely more on the more technical side, but hopefully we can maybe even do some one-on-one explaining, so even those aren't so technical, but know maybe why they want to ask their developers if they're doing it or if they've looked into it or that kind of stuff. So the topic for today is dependency injection, or maybe inversion of control might be a better way to talk about. So Timmy, do you have a definition for dependency injection or inversion of control, or which one do you use more often? Like let's just define some terms here. What is this? What is dependency injection?
Yeah. So for me, actually, dependency injections is we don't really want to have dependent from the actual class implementation class. So in case later on when we in the future maybe there's a changes or something, we just can really easily swap those things. For example, we have implementations with the database, let's say SQL Server, and then probably we want to change it to another DB engine, something like that. So we don't want to actually change the whole implementations of our code. So yeah, we can use the principle, the inversions of control, that one. So actually we just the dependency injections, the framework itself will automatically insert the class that we are needed to the class that we are working with, basically something like that.
Yeah. And when we say class, I think we even think of almost like the behavior, right? The functionality, the logic that we need. So and generally you don't define a specific instance. You define an interface because you may want to completely change that and not affect anything else, or most of the times you're really concerned about testing it and being able to test one certain bit of logic by itself. And then if it's used in all this other stuff, you don't want to test all the other stuff. You do that as well. So to be able to test that as well. So when we think of inversion of control, let's back up. So when I think of dependency injection, it's, hey, I'm injecting what this thing is, what the logic is, what this business, whatever the actual functionality is. I'm not defining it and where I'm using it. I'm just saying I need something that does this, and I'm asking a framework of some sort. Hey, give me this thing. And so that's what I think of as being dependency injection, being I'm injecting that logic into that. So dependency injection is I understand. It makes sense to me when I think of, all right, I'm requesting a calculator, and so give me something that calculates something, and so I'm not defining a code base. I'm defining that I need it, and so something else, some other framework is injecting that dependency that I have into whatever I'm doing. Inversion of control, is that exactly the same thing, just a different word for it, or is there a different context when you think of inversion of control or IOC?
I see. The inversions of control, I believe, is just like the flow. And the dependency injector is, I believe, it more into the frame. I mean, how we actually dealing with it. So let's say, for example, if we are defining a class and then in the constructor itself, we actually just like asking the interface usually because we are using all those things, the inversions of control, what you say that one, we must only rely on the interface, right? There's no, just the blueprint of the class. And then we actually, if by manually, we can, whenever we calling the class itself, we can directly how to say inherit from the interface the implementations, and we can do it the same but manually. But with the dependency injections, the one that I usually use is the Microsoft dependency injections. That one we need to defining in the startup class. That one maybe we can create extensions of it, and then we like giving the code to know if we are asking with this object one, for example, we need to give them these implementations of code, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So the dependency injection is how you're implementing that inversion of control idea, basically.
Yes.
Is what you're saying. So big idea, kind of the actual nuts, more the nuts and bolts sort of implementation of that. Yeah. So you mentioned using the Microsoft dependency injection framework, which is part of the .NET Core. So that's not even in the .NET 4.6 framework stuff. That is plugins. So we can't even use that within a plugin, but we can use it in anything that is going to be external to a plugin, so our function apps or any other reason you have running a .NET Core anywhere else. So in that case, great, we can use it. We can live in the world where all these other Microsoft developers are in, and all this other frameworks that support for and everything else, and learn all the intricacies of it, and great. So that's a great place to be in, and especially now that the .NET Core SDK is actually has a 1 in front of the version rather than a 0, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, this is the release. This is official. This is good to go, which has been exciting from a dev perspective. But when we think of the plugins, which there's kind of like a divide, I think, when I think of Dataverse developers. You've got those that have only ever done plugins, and then you got those that have done plugins, and then something else, then external connections. And I think the number of people that have only done plugins is fairly small percentage-wise, but the percentage of how much plugin development they do versus non-plugin development do can be very, very wide. You can meet somebody that they've done 1% of their work is outside of plugins, and someone else 99% of the work is outside of plugins. And so that's very interesting how we all come with these different experiences and different amount of knowledge and backgrounds and everything else. So when we think of the .NET plugin in the Dataverse that's running on the 4.6.2 framework stuff, we don't have that framework available to us. So do you practice that type of dependency injection still and that type of version control ideas within your plugins? Or do you do something else different? How do you handle that?
Now, this one is quite interesting questions actually, Daryl. Because when I'm writing the blog, right, regarding with actually me and my friends also creating a framework for the Dataverse, and then when we need to deploy it, we need to merge it, right? That's how it is if we are using third-party libs in for the Dataverse, something like that. We need to merge it, and people like crazy Daryl about this one. Hey, well, you need to merge it. It's not like safe, or it's not a good practice, or everything else. Something they mention it about all those negative things.
This is the great the great ILMerge Divide, right? There's developers who are like, yeah, we don't care if Microsoft says it's not supported. We're going to do it anyway. And then there's others like, no, let's Fudo. You can't, right? So, okay. So that kind of runs into the first problem when it comes to dealing with this. You're like, oh, well, I'll just go grab a framework that's already existing that works in .NET 4.6 and bring it in. And so you got already had people yelling and shouting there, you can't do that, you can do that, and all that kind of stuff, which is interesting. Because they're saying, hey, if it's a DLL, if it's already compiled, if it's this bit of code that you can't change, you can't bring it into your plugin and reference it currently. We hear rumors that at some point in time they're going to allow this, but currently you can't do that without doing some really funky, amazing magic underneath the covers that Microsoft's like, yeah, that's not really supported. So, okay, so that's what you're meaning by merging things together. I just wanted to clarify that. So what camp are you in now? Are you in the who cares, I do it anyway, or are you in the I'm not going to do that even though I kind of want to?
To be honest, I don't face any project that needs us to actually doing some fancy stuff in the plugins. Daryl, but for example, my company, my ex-company, what they did is actually they need to a little bit change the global behavior of the organization service. So with the framework we have, actually we we put the real implementations of organization service to like a one class, something like that, and then we actually change we inherit the organization service, organization service, that one, and then we change the implementations of the code. Maybe we want to, let's say when we counting numbers or something, we want to be the floating numbers only can accept 2-digit or something. So there's a ceiling or math ceiling or something for that one. And we actually, so developers need to use that object in particular to implement all those things together. So we have a very common things. So we are not using dependency injections. We just built around that one.
Okay.
In the
yeah. And I think I've done that exact same thing. So my plugin base classes, I implement my own iOrganization service and wrap it around the one that comes with the context to log everything. So whenever you do any querying, you get what SQL query you executed in the tracing, and then you can go back and go, oh, I forgot to filter the active records or something, or I didn't set this value when I didn't update, or whatever, which is amazingly powerful and also amazingly awesome when you don't have to. You define it somewhere over here, and then everything else just uses it because you've set it up that way. So it's not really a very legitimate way of doing it as far as like the dependency injection purist out there, but it works, and it's kind of been my way of handling that. And you could do other interesting things with that too. Like at one point in time, we did use it with a client to enforce that every single query expression that you wrote added on the a filter for active records only. So that way you didn't have to, and every query you didn't have to say active only. You would just automatically do it unless you flipped some weird flag or called it in a special way. So that's been kind of a fun way of handling. Another really interesting thing for injecting that kind of stuff globally. So, all right. What else were you saying there? Or do you remember?
No. I mean, I just yesterday actually I just saw your questions also in the LinkedIn regarding your feature that you want to limiting some. So there's several tables entities. It's very hard to update it to our terms right now, right? The one that you say we need to limiting maybe there's a expired or something. We actually can do it as well, right? With we need to have a framework actually that we need to implement in the plugin. So, like what you said just now, every developers when using the framework automatically can have the similar, experience without needs to add a lot of things. And I guess that's the things that our community lack, right? I'm not really sure I can say that one or not. That's how it is.
So there is also, by default, you do have, I mean, people don't even necessarily realize it, but you already have a dependency injection type of framework built into the plugin class in the plugin interface through the context to go get the I service provider. But you really don't have any good way of like defining what that is when you're actually running it within CRM, within the actual server. So that's been an interesting, there's, again, I think maybe it's the same Twitter post you're looking at, but there is, hey, we do it this way, we do it that way. Jordan Montagna was commenting on it, and he's like, yeah, you can do it this way. And I was like, and I do it this way. And they're like, well, that's a combination of two bad techniques. I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that. But our hands are kind of tied with the framework that we're in. And so it's kind of the way that I've done it before. So and the classic example is if you are wanting to call some external service in a plugin.
Yeah.
How do you test that without having to test that external service? Because if you want to have a test that tests the external service, great. You want to have a test that tests your logic, but not being dependent on the external service. And so all the time, that's what I've done all the time, is to create some simple extension method that just goes and tries to retrieve it from the iService provider. And if it doesn't, it defaults it to whatever value I want, which is this, it's not the best way to do it. It's not the pure way of let's just say the pure way of people, the purest out there. But our hands are kind of tied behind our backs, and it's such a small thing. It's not that big of a deal. So, and it's been immensely powerful because now in my unit tests, I can define, all right, here, I'm going to give you this fake version that doesn't actually hit my endpoint. So, yeah, have you done something like that in a plugin before, I'm assuming, or not?
Now, when calling external service, of course, it's not really needed the dependency injections. It's the same things with you, Daryl, actually. So we actually call the real things. It's just like we are using what's that one? Unsubstitute for that one, Daryl. So when we are doing in the unit testing, we actually not testing those things directly. So we just using the unsubstitute to checking. Let's say we are creating plugin in the post for contact, something like that needs to call another endpoints. So we just like mocking the code, the HTTP request or something to just return anything that you want in that case. But for the real implementations, we are not testing it directly, Daryl. It's kind of hard. Yeah, but like what I said before, people like always like going crazy, right? If we are using the third party libraries in our plugins, something like that. Yeah, it's kind of hard, I think, Daryl.
Yeah. Now I've seen some people that have even gone to the extent of, rather than every single query that they ever do, they create a separate interface for, and then they're injecting that in their unit tests, so they don't even have to have like a fake framework, like fake XrmEasy or my Xrm unit test or the Delegate S solution, where it's creating this fake CRM service. You're just, hey, this thing is, here are the input parameters for. I'm going to give you the data that actually hitting any service. So that's a very doable thing to do. But at the same point in time, and the purist would say that's the way you need to do it. But at the same point in time, like, but what if your query's bad? You don't know, because you're not actually testing that. So then I still have to have another test to go test it. And then how are you testing that? Because you don't have a fake. So I guess you could use a fake to test it. But then why are you complicating it with having to add all the extra mojo? Like it's funny how we have ideas that are I can't do this because it's not considered correct. It's not what the cool people are doing. It's not the pure way of doing things. And then there's other things that are like, yeah, I'm going to ignore that. Like, for example, the purist would say, for an interface, you create the interface in the class, and that's it. Where lots of times when I'm dealing with 4.6.NET and the new .NET Core, you don't have to worry about this because you can actually provide implementation to your interface. But in 4.6, you can't. you can't provide any implementation logic to an interface. And so what I do is, if I want to do that, I create an extension class in the same exact file that adds whatever functionality I want this interface to be able to do. And so that's all in the one file. Now people would say, "Oh, you can't do that because you can't have an interface." And I'm like, why not? What are you buying by having that separate? So it's always kind of a hard deal to figure out what do we follow, what do you adhere to, and what do we challenge, and what do we push back against. And when you're brand new to it, it's like, I have no idea. I just can do whatever they tell me to, because that must be the best way to do it. So when you've been working with dependency injection stuff, is there any standard thing that you go, no, I'm not going to do this, or thing that's the way that people say you should do it, that you're going to push that back against?
People, I mean, the people that around you not supporting the idea of maybe doing some fancy stuff in the plugins, right? There's another way also to doing it, which maybe we can create another web API that we are hosting in the Azure. Then maybe we can use the webhook, service endpoints, whatever you want it. Then we actually have a more freedom in there, because it's actually just pure .NET things that we can do. You can use the .NET Core. In that case, also, let's say we can implement, policy method, things. Let's say if we call the endpoint and then, the third party endpoint and fail, maybe we have a retry policy on top of that. So I guess, nowadays, I mean, if your project don't have limitations on using cloud services, creating web API, I believe will be much more simple. What you think, Daryl?
Okay, so you're saying create a web API abstraction that sits in between the real one and the fake one, so that way, whenever you're pointing to it, you can control that. Then.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't create a whole lot of that kind of stuff. Because I haven't done it. I haven't had a need to. Like, so this is like the first project that I'm on in like forever, where I'm now like having to look at app insights to go see what errors are happening in function apps, because I'm actually outside of the Dataverse box in the Azure box. Which was kind of scary. But at the same time was kind of like, yes, finally I'm learning how to do some of these things I should have known how to do for a while. So, so when I was picking up the dependency injection framework from .NET Core, which I think a lot of people are going to be picking up more and more now that the .NET Core SDK has been released, I kind of just had to copy whatever was already existing in the code base and doing a whole lot of Google searches. Do you have a better way? Is there like a better source to start from, or a better example that you could point people to that are just trying to learn and pick this stuff up?
Yeah, of course, I believe in Microsoft Docs. It's actually, there's a bunch tutorial in there. And then but to be honest, Daryl, when I think last year, actually, I have zero knowledge on Azure itself.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Yes. Then after I changed to the current company that I'm working with right now, they actually use a quite interesting method how they actually, using the dynamic CRM. So actually, I mean, they actually are creating the middleware that actually .NET Core. So every request from, let's say, you can say like BC or maybe third party customer portal or something like that, they actually not calling directly to the CRM, but they will calling this middleware. And then in this middleware, only after it's done. So the idea, the logic is, because if you are calling directly to the CRM, you know the data first, that one is not a very fast system. You can say, let's say you have a plugin that's very heavy, it can be maybe multiple seconds, maybe 10, 9, something like that, 10 seconds. It's not a very fast system, right? So what they do is actually they creating this middleware. They create the database as well in this one. And then after that, whenever there's a calling on the third party, something like that, it goes to the middleware, and the middleware that will directly respond back. Because this one in here, we are using SQL Server, which much more faster, and there's no logic, very heavy logic, something like that. But then after that, this middleware needs to sync back to the CRM. So that's why I read a lot of the implementations then, and then I learning. I just know also if we are using dependency injection, there's an auto disposal, something like that. Yeah, that's how I learned actually, Daryl. Yeah.
Cool. So one thing I realized or found out was in this project was to get around some issues with limitations on application users and number of calls they can make. I figured it was org specific, but there's user specific, and that was one of the things that we were hitting first. Was hey, we're getting too many requests for this one app user, and so one of the things I did with the dependency injection was to have it when I created my organizational service. I'm like, okay, well, rather than creating it this way, I'm going to add this little round robin logic that based on some configuration files, I could say, all right, well, first time through, you're going to use this one, and then this one, and then this one, and it all wrapped that all up and was nice and pretty, and it was it's kind of like sometimes you don't know if you're just starting with it, you may think this isn't worth it. How is this worth it? But then you get into the maintenance part of the program of the project, and you go, oh, I can make this one change here because it's all been architected in this dependency injection framework, and everything else uses it. I don't have to like update all these other things or touch everything or anything like that. It's just been it's just kind of crazy. And, and sometimes you get lazy, right? I'm a lazy developer. If I have to do something twice, it's once too much. And I even had this little context that I was like passing into this function that was like this record along with this record on this record. And so there's like 6 or 7 things I had to give to the constructor of this thing. Yeah. And it was just a POCO. It wasn't anything special. There's no logic with it. And I was like, I don't want to like have to define this every single time. And I was like, well, I can actually inject this. I can actually define this in my dependency injection and not have to. It just like, give me it, and it gives me it. So that's what I do, and that kind of stuff. It's there's a lot of these advantages. Like, man, I wish we could use that same exact framework in
the plugin itself. Yes.
I have no idea when Microsoft is going to be able to go, you know what, we've completely abandoned 4.6 and now we're running .NET Core on the server. When that happens, I can almost guarantee they're going to give, well, we can use it ourselves. We don't need to worry about them. We can create our own. We don't, but so at that point in time, never mind. I didn't care. There's no guarantee. It's not a surprise statement that I say that, right? Because you can just start using it without having to like get it from like the core of the project, right? But well, maybe they might provide a nice way for you to define your dependencies too, and set that up. So going back a little bit, we had mentioned that when it came to using it within a plugin, there's no built-in frameworks, right? Yeah. And so when I posted on Twitter, I think I had 2 or 3 frameworks that people suggested to use that were open source. One was open source and said, hey, you can just grab it and then compile it to yours. And so great. And another one was literally a single class. Like it was as basic as it can be, which was I think it was called Tiny IOC, which is like, oh, you know, that wouldn't be that bad. That doesn't seem like that much overhead to give yourself this dependency framework thing to be able to use. So I thought that was interesting. At the same point in time, I was like, if you're doing a lot of dependency injection in a plugin, maybe that's the wrong spot for it. Maybe that's too complicated. You know, maybe you're making it more complicated than it is. Do you have a line that you consider of, you know, this is good to do it. Let's not, you know, have you defined that for yourself?
Yeah, I believe it's always the answer for these questions is always be it depends, right?
It depends. Yes, isn't that the great answer? It depends.
Yeah, I mean, depends on your teammates as well. If your teammates is also like have a same skill level, I believe it's okay in that sense because everyone knows how it works. Because the most nightmares is it's, let's say you don't have like very good unit tests, right, Daryl? And then the new developers or maybe new developers or maybe people that don't know already in the organizations but don't know about that one may make the changes on the startup. the things that you are doing the dependency for that one.
Uh-huh.
And then they are wrongly use something, maybe they type something wrong in the code, it will be a nightmare also, right? In that sense, especially if that happens with our community, I guess. Yeah, it's very hard for the questions. I believe the answer is there is no like straightforward answer for that one. Yeah, but it is what it is.
It's the more time that we spend programming, the more I realize that it's not a science, it is an art. And you're going to do something different than somebody else, and you're going to have your own fingerprints on it. And you can't go, oh, that's wrong and that's right. You can just appreciate the differences between it and the advantages and disadvantages for it. Unless you're using late bound, then that's wrong. No, I'm kidding.
Yes. So I believe your name, Daryl. If not mistake, I heard. I saw your name, Daryl. Always early bound something. Is it?
Yeah, early bound forever. Is that what I? Yeah,
Early bound forever. Yes, your nickname.
Yeah, it's early bound forever. That's my Discord name. I was like, oh, I got to pick a name, and I don't want to be my name, but I want everyone to know who it is. So like, oh yeah, that'll work. Early bound forever. That'll be a simple name to use. So
yeah. But back again to that one, right? Once we already knowing something, I mean, we are tend to doing over engineering in that sense. Do you ever experience that things? I mean, like, the tiny IOC can do those things. So we are tend to make it something very fancy in that journey, right?
Yeah.
Realizing that it's very easy to do this one, then we are just like making it more and more complex in that sense. And then my senior will always like, this is too over engineering. You can do it much more simpler using this way, or what?
Yes. Yeah. There are a lot of times. So for me, it's I call it rabbit hole over engineering. So I'll get started on this. I'm like, oh, but if I'm going to do this, I really should do this. And oh, if I'm going to do this, I really should do this. Oh no, if I should do this, I really should do this. And then okay. Oh, but now I got to do this. And so I get like it's like a tree of all these little like permutations. And finally, I get back up to the very top. I'm like, what was I doing? Oh yeah, I was just writing a console to outline. Okay, cool, and a print line, and so that's some basic thing, but I needed like all this other stuff, or I felt like I had to do all this stuff. So that's my biggest engineering, over engineering failure or common issues. Oh, should I fix this? Should I make this better, or should I just move on and deal with it later? Right? That's half the battle, I think, of someone that's more experienced in programming. It's like, what do I consider good, and what do I consider good enough? And man, even in college, I don't know if you had this issue, but when I was in college, I couldn't. I'd figure out what the last test or last paper, English, when I was in English in college, the last paper of the semester, I could figure out, okay, I need to get a 60% on this in order to get an A in the class, or whatever grade I want in the class. So I was like, all right, so I just need to write a D level paper. Sure, that'll be easy. But I can't do that. I don't know how to give just the right amount of effort to be like, oh yeah, this is like D, C level, maybe B. I'm like, oh, this is wrong. I got it this way. I got it, and so it's kind of a blessing and a curse, I guess, right? I don't know. So, do you struggle with that as well?
Of course, Daryl. I believe almost every developers, right, is considered like a perfectionist in that sense. But throughout the journey, you always like learning something, and then you already say also where we need to stop when we are think it's a good enough, something like that. But when you trying new things, you try to experimenting with new things as well, right? I mean, maybe you learn about the framework, this framework. Maybe you want to use the new like mediator. It's not new also, but you are tend to like make all those things like fancy in that journey. But when after that you are realizing is that it's like too complicated, and then you roll back everything else and then redo again with the things that it's a very easy things to do. Yeah, I guess all developers, I believe, in some point always do that.
Cool. So the last episode we had was on not failures, horror stories, other horror stories, things that have gone horribly wrong. And I have one I'm going to share that I happened to me yesterday that we figured that I found what was going on. And so while I'm telling my story, I want you to think if you have any horror stories or something that went really wrong that you'd care to share, if you have an idea. If you don't, that's okay too. But I think it's something that's kind of interesting to do. So for me, you have your Azure DevOps shirt on, correct?
Yeah.
Show Azure DevOps. Yes. So the whole Microsoft build kind of pipeline functionality kind of stuff. So I had this. The project I'm in is the first time I've ever done Azure DevOps ever, and it's the first time I've ever done automated builds and deployments for CRM ever. It's always just been manually because I didn't have the time to figure that out. So I have this all working. It's been working great for months and months, no issues at all. And then we go to do something and it's not working in our other environments. Why is it not working in other environments? Right? And finally I get to the point where I download the DLL out of the other environments. I'm like, this DLL doesn't match source. Something's majorly wrong here with the deployment if my DLL doesn't match my source. And so after going through everything, and we had a couple guys that were just watching with me, and finally we figured out. Well, first I figured out if you use dir in your in the script on Azure DevOps, you can actually see what's in the file directory stuff, and so that was immensely helpful because it was a black box before that. But so that's one developer that was better in Azure DevOps, and I pointed out, and then I finally figured out. I wrote a little script to just to build the plugin, and then override the extracted solution plugin with the plugin I built. But I didn't take into account that in the solution, the plugin name removes all the periods in it. And so if you have like company name .dataverse.plugin.dll, it's just company name Dataverse. Company name Dataverse plugin.dll. There's no dots in the middle, right? And so when I copied it with the dots because that's what it was, and I didn't like rename it to not that. So I was copying it faithfully, and just happened to be lucky up until that point that people were building the correct version of the DLL or a good enough version of DLL when we were extracting it out, because we were never actually using the source controlled version of it. So so we found that out, and we rejoiced that yes, we have fixed the issue. But boy, was it painful. So do you have a story that you thought of while you're listening, or you're gonna pass on that one? You can pass. That's okay.
No. Yeah, I have one story actually, Daryl. So once, long time ago, the company I'm working with is actually changing how they are using the our own internal framework. So they are using the private Nugget package, something like that. But the problem is whenever you change something in the project, and then when you build it, it's automatically will send the package to the repository directly.
Okay.
So I didn't know that. I just got problems with the current build at that time, and then I was like thinking like, oh, maybe I need to test something. So I just like throw up error message, something like that. And then after that, I built that Nugget package, and automatically the repository updated as well. And then, you don't remember those things because when I'm testing it, I don't get the error. Then I roll back the code, something like that. Then it's finished, right? But then 1 year later,
a year later,
yes. So it's maybe like it's not a very active feature that they are used or something. The client contact that there's an error, and then after that, all my friends knowing because the message is quite clear, like the words that I always say,
Okay.
Yeah. So directly all the people like pointing at me. Oh, so you're the one that. Oh, congratulations! You make one year back anniversary for that.
Some MVP you are. Sometimes I get that. Joking with me because they know that there's nothing special about having that. Doesn't make you a incapable failure, that's for sure. So you are approaching your year anniversary.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I should find out via email if I've been renewed, as will all the other MVPs. Are you safe until next year because you were in like September, or did you have to renew? Did you have to renew already? I'm guessing you didn't have to renew already because you were so late in the year.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
so
quite entitled, Daryl. So
you get a
for
free
me,
year basically. Yeah, or
correct.
free half a
Yes.
year if you think of it that way. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But I'm
So
trying my
tomorrow,
best. I'm
by the
trying my
time this
best to.
podcast comes out, I
Yeah.
may not be an MVP, and you may be the MVP on the show. So we never know. Could happen.
Impossible, Daryl.
Oh no,
Impossible.
it's always possible. It's always possible. So, yeah. So you, what, or how did you earn? Like, no, you don't know for sure, but how did you earn the MVP status? What did you do to obtain that award?
Wow, this one is quite interesting story actually, Daryl.
Uh-huh.
I believe the answer is just a lucky.
Mhm.
Yes,
Just
yes, yes.
lucky. You think
Yes.
they just put your name in there and picked your name out? Hey, we
Yeah,
need someone named
this why.
Temmy.
Yeah, but that's why I'm not like feeling like entitled to the title, and people
Uh-huh.
always like saying things like, "Well, you're MVP or something," But I don't think like I'm entitled to those title actually the title actually. So what happened is actually I'm trying to answering the questions in the forum last time, the
Mhm.
CRM community forum, but I always lost with those Indians guys. Every time there's a questions, I refresh, it's already got answer on that. But eventually,
Okay.
yeah, right. That's
Yeah.
how it is,
The
how
same
it
issue
works.
with Guido back in the day in Stack Overflow. He'd always answer the questions before I get to it. I was like, how do you always do this? And they're always really good questions, and I can't be like mad that he answered it poor. Like, Guido. So yeah, no.
Guido, Eric Levin, those the guys that always got question the answer correctly, right? But
Uh-huh.
eventually, there's when I moved to KL, and then Microsoft starting to post the community things, so they are building the Epic community forum, something like that. And then people know me because of I always trying. So let's say I'm answering 10 questions, maybe I'm only correct one or half of it.
Only
So I'm not
correct
really.
or only marked correct?
Yes, the mark correct. Yeah,
Okay, marked
yeah,
correct.
something
All
like
right,
that.
yes.
Maybe just half correct the answer, but yeah, at least like people know me about that one, and then these people like inviting me also in the community because he's a local Malaysian, and then in there, I'm also not a first choice. The leader is different people. Then there's all Darani also in there. But after some time, we are build. I'm making the community event or something. One of the leaders is, get out from the community, and then because no one there that very active, Daryl, I'm selected. So
So now
yeah.
you're a big fish in a little pond, or big fish, big fish in a little pond. I got it right. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm just lucky in that sense. So Darani got the title, the MVP Things, and then he starting to asking me to, doing talking in some of other community groups as well. But I don't feel like I am good enough actually. Daryl. Like my English was also not really good in that sense, and also uh, how to say when I'm talking, I always like there's a lot of constant thinking in my brain. Maybe it's just like like a very, very programmer things. So I couldn't speak like the marketing people does.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then when I'm when I'm feel like I'm talking, it's too technical and only less people that know what you are talking about, right? Yeah, then in there, I think I need to, learning how to communicate much more better. That's why I'm pushing myself to write blog once per week. It's
Yep.
very stressful, but yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying the progress actually. And then after that, not so long after that, Darani nominate me, and then yeah, I've got selected. Daryl. Yeah, that's the story. Yeah,
That's the story, and you're sticking
yeah,
to it. Good. Well,
lucky,
lucky. Stick
lucky.
with the lucky stuff. Yes.
Yes.
Um, is there anything else we need to cover? Anything else you wanted to mention before we get to wrap up the episode?
Uh, I'm good, I guess, Daryl.
Good, your guess.
Nice
Awesome.
to meet you. I'm feeling honored also. Yeah, have this chit chat with you. Even
Yeah.
though I also look forward for Scott, because Scott and you
Yes.
is also very popular, right? So
Uh,
yeah, back in 2015, I guess, when I first encountered the dynamic CRM, uh, Scott name is on the screen all the time when we
all
are
the time.
doing your
All the
yes.
time. Yes. There's. I don't know if you how much time you spent on the MVP what's the word, Slack channel, but there's so many things that like Scott posts on there, or he posts videos of all this stuff, and like all the other MVPs are like, how do you do all that stuff? Like, how do you? Yeah, I mean, he's. It's. I'm sure it's a blessing and a curse for him as well, and that people appreciate it, but like he probably spends way more time than I would do it or others would do it. The same thing with Jonas. Like he would,
Hmm.
even before he had his incident,
Yeah.
he would he'd spend an hour prepping for something, timing it, getting it just right, and it always came out very, very professionally.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's because I'm naturally, if English is my first language, it's my only language, and so I there comes a lot more issues with having to be thinking about saying things in a different language than your main language, but
Yep.
or if I lean more on, I try to be more humorous or more entertaining and don't worry so much about being a cookie cutter or perfect in my implementation, or maybe it's
Yep.
just because I'm lazy. I don't know, but so it's just interesting how we all have these little things that can be both positive and negative, and how what level of perfection we set for ourselves in doing things. So yeah, good point. Yeah, so we all deal with that. We all start with that at different levels, and there are plenty of things about Scott that I'm like, I wish I was more like Scott, but I'll be me. I'll let him be him, and we can encourage, and you be you, and we can encourage each other. So that's the mental health update for the XrmToolCast, I guess, today. So, Timmy, how can our listeners get a hold of you and get a hold of maybe drop your blog post for people to go your blog, people to go check out that you're doing once a day. What is that, and how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so people can find me in the Temmy, Temmy, Raharjo, Temmy Raharjo, .wordpress.com. That's my only blog. And then you can find me as well in the LinkedIn, Temmy Wahyu Raharjo.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Timmy, I appreciate you coming on, and that's how our listeners can get a hold of you. If our listeners, this is the first time I think I've ever done this. If our listeners want to get a hold of us at the XrmToolCast, feel free to hit us up on Twitter or on LinkedIn, or email us at cast@xrmtoolbox.com. So, Tammy, great meeting you, like, virtually. I don't think we ever talked before. I don't think we weren't even LinkedIn friends until after I saw your post. So, right. So we really needed to catch up there. So,
Really?
and then it's great
Daryl,
seeing,
I'm so mean
right.
if
Well,
I'm
because
doing
I don't
that.
think I don't think we were LinkedIn friends till then. Because I was like, oh, he's an MVP. Oh, so I was picking up everything. Also, I don't know if it's just my brain, but your profile pic isn't you. It's a caricature
Image,
of
yes.
with the image, and so sometimes I get a hard time and the brain just doesn't like go, oh, this is this person, this is like, because you see different ones, and so it's good to actually be able to go, oh yeah, Temmy, him, Temmy, yes, and be able to handle to be able to correlate those things. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming on, even if it's just to talk to me and Scott's not here, because that would be a letdown for any guest. So I appreciate you still making the time, and I wish you well in all you're doing. So I will
Same to
talk
you,
to you later.
Daryl.
Right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Bye. This has been the XrmToolCast with Daryl Labar and Scott Daryl. Produced by Lynn Zawin. If you have any questions or suggestions, please send them to cast@xrmtoolbox.com, tweet @XrmToolCast, or hit us up on our LinkedIn XrmToolCast page.